1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, our man James Ham. James, man, you told us from jump. You gave us a pretty strong indication on Friday. You said, yeah, Mark Jackson's got a real shot at this thing. And here we are a couple of days later. It's Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, and Steve Clifford. I'll ask you the question I just asked Kenny. Are the Kings being cautious? Is this a cautious approach by the Sacramento Kings?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen at least one of the inexperienced coaches been on the final list. Like, let one of those guys interview, see if they've got something, see if they can capture your imagination. But, the list itself, it's the list of 7 I thought was really intriguing. It had a little bit of something for everyone, and if you broke the 7 up, you could kind of like take away 3 and take away 3, and you ended up with Mike Brown in the middle. He's the guy that makes a lot of sense. He still makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think this is a somewhat cautious approach. It's a defensive-minded approach for sure. So that is something that, like in my conversations with people inside the walls, the goal here is to get a steady veteran hand that has a track record as a defensive, genius. And to be honest, I think all 3 of these guys can coach defense. Steve Kerr has even, talked about how Mark Jackson really had instilled defensive principles with the Golden State Warriors before he took over that team. And that made his transition to being an offensive genius much easier because they already had some defensive principles in there. But I think if nothing else, this is a moment where everyone should just take a deep breath, calm down. Don't freak out over every story that comes out, and let the process play out.
No. No.
In your opinion, James, do you think did they go into this process thinking we're not going with one of these young guys? Like, we'll interview them, we'll do our due diligence. But unless somebody really just blows the door off this interview, we're going with an experienced guy. Or did they have an open mind the entire time, and this is just what they came up with at the end?
Yeah, I think it's probably both of those. I think you're probably right. I think that this is a process that at the end of the day, they were going to look at, all kinds of different options here, right? And they needed to kick the tires on, especially these young guys, especially with the success that young guys are having. But at the end, you're also looking at a team that just really hasn't been able to sort of build something. And veteran guys, they've been there. They know what to do. They know how to handle some of these situations. And I think that they learned a lot even from having Alvin Gentry this last year. Like, that steady hand doesn't let the wheels completely fall off the bus. This wasn't a good season. It could have been much, much worse. Could have been much worse. And that's because Alvin Gentry stepped in and just ushered them through the year. And so this thing didn't completely implode, even if the record wasn't good, even if they had a bunch of struggles early in the year. So I think that is one of those things you learn from. Like, if they were going to go with a young coach, they better be able to land one of these veteran coaches as their number 2. And I think the easier path is to find somebody who has been there before.
You're listening to D'Lo and Casey on ESPN 1320 KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by Lashers. Elk Grove Dodge, 1320 Kings insider James Ham with us here as the Sacramento Kings have narrowed their coaching search down to Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, and Steve Clifford. Mark Jackson is obviously an incredibly polarizing topic, and for a franchise that had DeMarcus Cousins, why not? Like, we've lived through polarizing topics before. I like Mike Brown a lot, but the one that I feel like everyone is like, on is Steve Clifford. Give me some positives on Steve Clifford.
Well, first of all, he's an incredible defensive coach. Incredible. Like he worked through the Van Gundy systems. He coached
Both of
under
them.
both Jeff and Stan Van Gundy. And every team, almost every single team he's ever coached or been a part of, improves defensively and has rates really, really high. I think he has, as a head coach, he has one season outside of like the top 14 in defensive rating, and most seasons it's like top 8. He is a very, very good defensive coach. Now, as far as the rest of it, like the offense can lead something, leave something to be desired. But you have two really good offensive players, and you might be able to get the offense up to speed. You could also bring in an offensive-minded coach to help you in that area. But I think it's about defensive principles. It's about defending without having to have a natural shot blocker on the court the whole time. It's about understanding your rotations and understanding, what is it, KYP, know your personnel, right? All of those things. So at the end of the day, is he my first choice? Probably not. But he is my number 2 choice for sure on this list.
Okay. Wait. Oh, Mark Jackson. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll get to Mark. We're gonna need some time for Mark. Go ahead.
With Steve Clifford, do you feel like, because we kind of went over it a little bit earlier in the show, but just the playoffs that he made in a weak Eastern Conference, I don't want to take it away from him, but I guess I'm kind of taking it away from him. Like he didn't have a whole lot on those rosters. I'll granted give him that, but I mean the success, you gotta tell the whole story. Like Doc Rivers always asks to do.
I wish you guys would tell the whole story.
And I feel like that is where Clifford's ceiling is. It's like maybe get you into the playoffs, you lose in 5, and that's really about it. Like I don't look at him as somebody that can guide you for the next 5-6 seasons.
Okay. Yeah. So here's the problem that I have with that thought. When I look at Mike Brown, I can tell you that he had, in almost every season he coached in Cleveland, he had LeBron James on his roster. He also had Kyrie Irving the one time that he did not have LeBron James. He also had Kobe Bryant, Pau Gasol, named that Laker, right, when he was coach of the Lakers. And when I look at Mark Jackson, 3 of his guys are going to be in the Hall of Fame. And he played a role in helping to develop Steph and Clay and Draymond. But at the same time, like, he coached really, really high-level basketball players. I don't think there's a single Hall of Famer on any coach, on any team that Steve Clifford ever coached. He's never had the all-star level guys. Maybe you can say Kemba Walker was an all-star level guy, but still, he helped create him into an all-star level guy. In the right setting, he was an all-star level guy, but not someone who is just going to make the all-star team because he's one of the top, 15 players in the league.
Right.
So look, you have to always, like, there is a whole story when it comes to guys, when it comes to coaches. And, you have your system guys, you have your guys who create all-stars, you have your guys who, are really good at managing superstar personalities. I think you're looking at a list with kind of a few of different approaches. And, again, Mark Jackson had young superstars before they were really who they were. He still had David Lee, who was a really good player and stuff like that when he was with the Lakers. But, like, I always want to, like, slow people down and say, okay, well, what would Steve Clifford have done if he was on this team? Do we know that he wouldn't have taken a team and been great? Could he have taken that Cleveland team that was really, really good defensively, but had LeBron James that could score a bucket anytime you needed one? Could he have taken that team to the championship? I don't know. So there's always that element of what if. So I want to be like fair to guys, which is why I have him as my second rated coach. He comes in with very little baggage. He is sort of a, to be honest with you, he's exactly what Vivek said he didn't want. He is a Sousa marching band leader. That's what he is. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I thought the statement when he originally said it was ridiculously short-sighted. And he wanted, a jazz conductor. I get it. It sounds cool, but like functionally, it doesn't always lead to wins, which is why the Kings lose every year. They don't have the structure in place a lot of the time. They're looking for the wrong type of guy. And they had the right guy and they let him go. So I don't want to totally blank him out of this conversation because I do think he's a good coach. I think he's made the playoffs in 4 of his 8 seasons as a head coach in the NBA and did it with not a whole lot of talent. The best season he had was 48 wins. That's not going to cut it in the Western Conference. But I could also argue that he never once had a big man as good as Sabonis. I could argue that, again, his one guy that he did have is probably equal to or slightly less than what De'Aaron Fox will be in his prime, and Kemba Walker. And so, again, I want to be fair to guys and that just be balanced when you're looking at these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Mark Jackson at the bottom of your list?
Number one, without any question, he's by far not even remotely close. He's the least qualified coach. He's never worked as an assistant. Again, like if you look at Steve Clifford and you look at Mike Brown, both of them have 8 years of head coaching experience. Both of them have 13 seasons as assistant coaches. Both of them. Mark Jackson has nothing. Like, he hasn't coached in the league in 8 years. This is like what you've mentioned. It's almost like a John Gruden thing, but it's not even. John Gruden thing would be more like if Jeff Van Gundy wanted to come out of retirement, because at least John Gruden had coached at a high level for quite a bit of time before he left and went to the booth. This is just different. And, it's the X's and O's are one thing. He did lead a horrible, horrible Warriors franchise that had missed the playoffs and went like 17 out of 18 seasons they had missed the playoffs. And he started with like their 29th in defense, helped them improve in year 2 to a top 10 defense, helped them improve greatly in year 3 to a big-time defense. Again, he had guys like Michael Malone and people who, like, it's not hindsight with Michael Malone. Michael Malone was one of the best lead assistants in basketball. Mm-hmm. He's also, like, at that point, he had been an assistant for a long time, and he's also the son of Brendan Malone, who is one of the great defensive coaches in the history of the game, right? He's the guy with the Detroit Pistons. He's Chuck Daly's right-hand man. Mm-hmm. So, like, I don't want to take away everything that he accomplished in Golden State, but he was flat out run out of town after putting up 51 wins. Run out of town. And you can say it a bunch of different ways if you want, but just look at how it played out. And it was not pretty. And it wasn't pretty for a long time. And he never went back and kept coaching. We talked about this before, that a guy like Mike Brown has been on the staff of Steve Kerr for the last 6 years. He didn't have the offensive chops, if you will, to be creative on the offensive end. And he was just known as a defensive coach. Well, he just went and worked for the best offense in basketball for the last 6 years. That's a lot. He's done the work, and that's what it comes to with Mark Jackson. A lot of guys just want to be a head coach. That's fine. But like, he got his opportunity, and it was more about the other stuff that he couldn't do, that he couldn't control, that lost him that job, that spun out of control behind the scenes. And a lot of that's because he didn't have the experience. And then he still doesn't have the experience. So I would like to, be fair with him, and that's without even looking at all of the off-court stuff. Mm-hmm. When you start bringing that stuff in, now you're talking about baggage. You're talking about more and more baggage. So, again, I want to be fair in this whole thing. And I want to tell you that, Mark Jackson did really well defensively with a really good defensive coach next to him. Just like, Stan Van Gundy and Jeff Van Gundy, were really, really good defensive coaches, and Steve Clifford was right alongside him learning the whole time. But like, there's too many red flags in my book, and he could be the head coach, and I'll have to figure out how to rectify that down the road. That's the way it goes. But I really do believe that, like, some people, like, when they get their opportunity and they take advantage of it, that's one thing. But and I think to a certain degree he did take advantage of his opportunity. But then when you have a setback, you don't just go away from the game for 8 years and not do anything to better yourself and then expect to get the same opportunity again. At least that's not the way it typically works. And so, he's really low on my list because he has almost zero at this point, zero experience. Like, any experience he had was 8 years ago. Any experience he had as a player was like 18 years ago. I mean, it's years. We're talking almost 2 decades. And so if you want to be in the game, you got to keep up. The game has changed so much from when Mike Brown was first a coach to where it is now. It's just completely changed. I mean, again, we talked about this once before. Peja Stojakovic retired, at the 2011 season. He retired. He was third all time in three-point makes. He's now like 24th. The game has completely changed. And while Mark Jackson has watched the game change, so have we. You and I have watched the game change as well. But that doesn't mean that we're in it, coaching it and learning and seeing the differences. And like, there's all kinds of ways you could see this thing going wrong. And that's just on the X's and O's side.
Yeah, it's great points for sure. When you talk about the basketball aspects of Mark Jackson and him trying to get back into coaching. What I'll ask your opinion for, James, is it seems as though the opinions of others like Joe Lacob and anonymous sources, they tend to weigh heavier on how Mark Jackson was as a coach in his time in Golden State than that of the players that played for him. Guys like Steph Curry, guys like Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, Jared Jack, who vouch for him repeatedly on the record. This isn't, I heard Steph. No, they get in front of the camera. They say it with their chest every time. And it seems as though their experience with Mark Jackson doesn't get held in the same regard as Joe Lacob's and the people that say off the record the things that went on with Mark. Why do you think that is?
Well, first up, I would tell you that if you're a head coach and you can't get along with your stars, you're in a bunch of trouble. So your relationship with star level players is always going to be different. It's always going to be high level because they're your stars. And if you lose them, you lose everybody. But where is the Festus Ezeli conversation? Where is a player that he literally lied to his team and said that Festus Ezeli wants you to fail because it would make him look better because he got injured and you guys won't be as good without him? And then the whole team turns on Festus Ezeli and he's like, wait a sec, what happened? Like, I didn't say any of that. Like it's not how your stars think of you. And we can all think, that Steph and Draymond, they all have a strong opinion of him, right? That's not really who should matter. It's the other 12 guys on the roster that you have to treat in a specific way. And that, like, I think a lot of those voices would be different. Are they out there? Do they have a platform to say this about him? Probably not at this point. But, some of the guys that are no longer in the league, some of the guys that didn't find the same success, they're going to have a different view of him. Like, every star player has, you have to get along with those guys. That's the job. It's to win over the stars and then have everyone else fall into place. So like I would like to take their like Steph's opinion at face value. And I do. I do. I believe his experience with Mark was great. But I also think that we know that there were other players that did not feel the same way. There were assistants that didn't feel that way. There were a lot of employees that didn't feel that way. And that's where you have to balance out, like, it's not whose opinion matters more. It's that there's usually two sides to every story. And so I'd also say this, like, look, the reporting that's been done on him, it's not like, again, you can see the tweet thread, right? The tweet thread is one thing that some guy went out and tweeted this whole thing out when he was up for the Knicks job. Every single one of the actual stories themselves, except for maybe one, comes with the actual reported story. And these are by trusted voices. They're not some crazy fly-by-night people. We're talking about Marcus Thompson. We're talking about, some Zach Lowe. We're talking about really good reporters who did the work. And like when I watched, I do a lot of research to when I go through this. And shout out to Brendan Nunez, who brings me all kinds of crazy stuff and says, "Hey, read this, read this." I'm like, okay, or watch this. I watched him on with Shannon Sharp, and again, Shannon Sharp's show is a little bit like the machismo guys, like sitting there talking guy stuff. And so I think that there is a persona that is like portrayed on that show. But when he was asked about this specifically, it wasn't, he had a straight denial of everything that was ever been written wrong about him. But it was also like, show up and let's debate this. And there was no contrition. There's no accountability for some of the things that we know to be true. And it's more of, hey, somebody's source said this or somebody's source said that. There was like a hunt for who has said the anti, the homophobic thing that's pinned on him. There's like a hunt for who put that out there. Who's the anonymous source? Who's the anonymous source?
Who
And
is the anonymous source?
Just a spoiler alert, there could be like 10 of them.
yeah,
He didn't say that in private.
Right.
yeah, no, he didn't. He didn't say that in private. So look, I think at the end of the day, again, you have to be balanced and you have to be fair, and you can't let that, like a bully pulpit, be the way that you handle situations like that. Like, did you make mistakes? Yeah, I made mistakes the first time around. I learned from my mistakes. I'm ready to be better. And I hope that I get another opportunity. Okay, that took me 10 seconds. That probably would have gone a long way, but I haven't heard that.
He said that.
Oh, I don't know.
In the Sharp interview, he said, absolutely, I would do things differently.
Well, yeah,
he didn't get into specifics. He didn't. But
but he didn't say I
absolutely
made mistakes. He said I would do things differently, but he didn't say I've made mistakes. If I'm not, I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure he didn't say that. And that's why, look, I think there's just so much to this story of back and forth. And, the report today about Vivek Ranadive preferring Mark Jackson or whatever. I know Kings fans are just absolutely out of their mind. We all need to take a step back, and we need to make sure that, number one, has Mark Jackson even been in the building yet for Vivek Ranadive to have that kind of thought? Number two,
Vivek is the Kings' new biggest rival. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah. But Vivek wasn't on the Zoom calls. He wasn't part of the first round of interviews. And all of a sudden,
hold on. Can you run that back? Can you say that one more time for the people in the back?
Yeah. According to the reporting of the great Sam Amick, which I've had plenty of conversations. I trust Sam as much as I trust any writer in the business. According to Amick, Vivek was not in the Zoom meetings. It was Joe Dumars and Wes Wilcox and Monty McNair that did the Zoom interviews. And so the first round was done without Vivek. The second round is where Vivek is going to be part of the in-person interview and going out to dinner and stuff like that and getting comfortable. So again, what we're saying here is that that if Vivek already chose him, he chose him outside of the interview process. And so again, I think at some point you have to take a step back and say, okay, why are we getting information? And I trust Mark Stein as well. Somebody told him the information that he got. It's just, why is it that we're getting that information now? Who are we getting that information from? Why is it happening now versus 2 weeks from now? Like there's value in that information. And if you can't see the value, then, you're not looking for it. Got me?
100%. 100%.
Guess the source is always a fun game to play when it comes to NBA Twitter. Stuff is always out there for a reason, but that sure.
Well,
see, this is difficult but Mark Stein's a good reporter.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of whether Mark Stein actually got that information. It's a question of whether that information is actually accurate. And according to James, or I guess to be fair, according to Sam Amick, who's not allowed to appear on the show, it's not. Vivek hasn't been a part of it. So how could Mark Jackson? No.
There's a way that those two things could be exclusively true. That both of those things could be true. That Vivek has fallen in love with him, and that Mark hasn't been in Sacramento yet, because he could fall in love with him on his own, doing other things with other people calling him and trying to change his mind about Mark. And so there are different ways that could happen, but
that feels like a reach.
Yeah, well, I mean, but this is.
I'm not putting it above. I'm not saying as though the Kings are incapable of doing that.
Yeah,
I'm just saying at this point we're falling. Essentially, what you're saying is falling in love with the idea of Mark Jackson.
Well, I mean, he does know Mark. There's no question there. He does fully know Mark. I mean, he was an owner of the Golden State Warriors, an active minority owner when Mark Jackson was a head coach there.
The tweet says Mark Jackson has impressed Kings owner Vivek Ranadive in the interview process.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Specific wording of what Mark wrote.
Yeah.
Define the interview process. He's not in the interview.
He's watching old interviews of Mark Jackson.
He's not in the interviews. He's part of the process.
Again, I can tell you that every single Zoom call has a little button that says
recording started.
Recording started. So was Mark Jackson was the interviews again? You could easily record the Zoom interviews and he could watch them back later. And so again, there's so many layers to the onion. I just think that what we have to do here is take a step back, let the process play out. Steve Clifford was first. Mark Jackson is second. Mike Brown will be later in the week because of the playoff schedule, and then he'll get his opportunity to make his case. He's also going to get the last turn, and that's usually a really valuable thing. So I think this always has come down to, in my opinion, whether Mike Brown wants a job or not.
I think the dogs are excited about Mike Brown. We can hear them running into the.
They may have just shown up.
The James Ham podcast studio. We'll come back. We'll check on James's dogs. We'll talk more about these three finalists, and we'll ask James who he thinks is going to be the head coach here. And as we continue on Sacramento's #1 sports station, is D'Lo and Casey along with James Ham here on ESPN 1320. Clear.
A Gregory. So Grady says, stop quoting players for what they think of other players and coaches. It's all empty calories. The fraternity is too tight. You know what fraternity is tighter than that? The coaches fraternity. And you know what fraternity is tighter than both of those? The owners fraternity. So if you owners, I'll put it to you like this. If the owner said, he ain't working no more. He ain't gonna work no more. That's just, I'm not saying that's what happened, but if you want to play that game, Gregory, there's a fraternity tighter than all of them.
Dogs came in like Stone Cold. Look at Bryce with that Kings Beach shirt on right there.
Nice.
The baby daddy. No, you misunderstood. Sam literally can't come on our show. He's
There ain't
paid
no
not
beef.
to. He's got a. I'm very happy for Sam getting that money to not come on the show, but yeah, he can't. He's exclusive to the bad guys.
Yeah, like I'm gonna point this out, like right here. I'm worried about the Festus Azelis of the world. Yeah, you shouldn't be worried about the Festus Azelis of the world because he's not in the league anymore. You should be worried about the way that people treat people. That's what you should be worried about.
Yeah, I'm disappointed how many people in the chat missed that.
Yeah,
That was disappointing because he wasn't the only one. Like Cole said the same thing. Like we're minimizing people now because of their place on the roster. Like, come on, guys, we're better than that.
Yeah, I mean,
like that's yeah.
You got to have a full buy-in. I mean, did we not just walk into a Sacramento Kings season where two guys wouldn't buy in, and you watch the whole thing frickin' implode?
Yeah,
I mean,
Here's what I'll say about that. Those guys, Steph, Dre, and Iguodala, they're in that locker room too. They were in there too. And if it went down the way it's been reported, what you guys are telling me is that those three men are like, yeah, what he did to Festus was cool. That if it's going down exactly how it was reported, yeah, that's cool. He's a good coach. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if it went down the way it's been reported.
They didn't get specifically asked about the Festus Ezeli situation, not in anything that I've seen.
That's part of him being a good coach, though. Like that's part of him being a leader and all this other stuff. Like that, he would do that to people, and they'd still be like, "Yeah, he's good. Hire him." I don't know, man. I don't know if the type of person Steph is, Andre. That if it went down the way it's been reported, I'm not saying it's 100% false or nothing like that, but if it went down the way it's been reported, that they would be cool with that and be like, yeah, he's still a great coach. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, but I think we've already seen that there was a certain level of buy-in from Steph Curry. I mean, go back to the anointed oil ankle story. Like, Steph Curry shows that his buy-in was 100% to Mark Jackson, enough that he went to his church, ran around the gym on a bum ankle. He just hurt his ankle. Then stayed around on stage, got his ankle anointed with oil, and was told that his ankle was healed, and then ran around the gym because that's what he was asked to do.
So this is what I hear. I hear y'all saying Mark Curry got Steph Curry brainwashed. That Steph is so loyal to Mark that he would disregard bad things happening to other people.
No. I think that Steph was a young player at that point, and I think that young in the league.
Guys.
Okay,
we're coming back. You've got a chance to win 2 VIP tickets to the Golden Sky Fest, the 2-day music, beer, and food fest at Discovery Park this October 15th and 16th. You can enter on the contest page at ESPN1320.net. That conversation regarding Mark Jackson continued well through the commercial break. Kenny, you want to pick up where you left off?
No, I look at like Steph Curry, Andre Iguodala, Draymond Green, Jared Jack is another guy. Jared Jack is a role guy. He's not a star who has had plenty of good things to say about Mark in the past. And my question was, when we bring up the Festus Ezeli thing and everything that happened there, you compare that to Steph Curry and these other guys being proponents for Mark to get another job. They were in that locker room. And if the story went down the way it's been reported, the way it's been told, the other thing I also want to say about that is nobody's on the record aside from maybe Andrew Bogut. You got to look into that. But all the people that say Mark was, this terrible guy and he was doing nobody's on the record. Those three are in front of cameras. They're in front of microphones every time talking about the good that he did and that he should get a job. All this other stuff I'm not saying it's not true, I'm just saying it's hearsay. Nobody gets on the record and says this is what happened. I've talked to somebody personally who was in that organization that told me when all this was going down, man, a lot of this stuff they talk about, Mark, I'm there every day. It's not what's being said. He said straight, is he perfect? Absolutely not. But it's not everything that's being said. Talk to this man personally. So when you talk about the stories the way they're reported, if these guys are willing to stick their neck out publicly and continue to say that he deserves a job, he deserves another opportunity, he's a really good coach, are you guys telling me that they're just ignoring the bad stuff that he did in the locker room and are just saying that he deserves to be a coach just because they like him or what? Like Steph Curry, Draymond, Andre, they're ignoring what he did to Festus and being like, that's not my problem. He handled his stars right. He should be a coach. Is that kind of what's being implied here?
No, I think what's being implied is their experience may have been different than other people's experience with the same person.
But they lived in that. They lived in it. This wasn't a secret. The Festus Zealand thing, that wasn't a secret moment that happened anywhere else. Like if it went down like it's being reported, that he told the rest of the team that Festus wants them to lose. Festus comes back and is questioned about it, and he's almost brought to tears. That happened in front of them. So what the people are telling me is Steph, Andre, Draymond are like, yeah, we saw what happened to Festus, but hey, that didn't happen to us, so I ain't got nothing bad to say about him.
Well, I can tell you that in no situation that I've seen have they been asked specifically about that story at all. Like I haven't seen them been asked specifically about that story and about how Mark treated others than themselves. Mm-hmm. And again, like they have an opinion. I get it. My point isn't even that stuff. It's that what have you done to show that you're ready to be an NBA coach again? Because you say you're ready? You haven't, because you talk about it on the TV? Like, that doesn't make you an NBA coach. And I get it. He was a player for a long time in the league and a really good player. He was a really good player. But the league isn't the same when he left it. It's just not. And he hasn't been doing the work that the other guys have done. And so people will say, why do you just focus on the stories of that time? It's like, because there's no other like thing to look at. It was a 3-year period. He didn't coach before it. He didn't coach after it. I can tell you what the path of a guy like Steve Clifford and a guy like Mike Brown, I can tell you their path to the league. I can tell you their successes and their failures. And then I can tell you where they went afterwards as they tried to improve as coaches. Mm-hmm. Well, like if you don't cut it the first time, and again, we can argue whether he was able to cut it or not. He showed improvement as a basketball coach on the court. Like they got better. They were a better team from the first year to the last year. But what have you done after that? I got nothing. Like, again, because you talk about it on the TV does not mean that you know the X's and O's. It does not mean that you've been keeping up with all of the film study and everything else that all of these coaches have done. Mike Brown still sits there and goes through the details of every single one of the scouting reports for every game with Steve Kerr and with the team. Like, those are things where he's learning. So continued education is part of it. Mm-hmm. So that's again, maybe it would work. It's very possible. But I mean, you're fighting a 16-year battle, and I don't know how many head coaches that have failed. And you got one guy with 3 years of experience and other guys with 21 each of coaching with some of the best coaches in the league.
Sorry, I fell down a rabbit hole.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I two just quick question, actually, for Kenny. You were harping on the Festus Ezeli thing for a minute. Are you questioning the validity of that report?
I mean, all I can do is take it at face value. Like, people have reported it, and it's been reported. I'm not saying it's not out there where the story came from. I just hadn't read where the story came from. It's just an anonymous source says that this happened.
Okay.
That's what I've seen.
Okay. I see. You're asking the origins of the story. Okay, I got you.
That's all I can go. Like that's what I'm not going to say. That's a lie.
I found the original port, and I can't. There's no one tied to the story. I did find an exchange, I guess, on Twitter between Festus Ezeli and Mark Jackson. So, I told you I fell down a rabbit hole here. This was 5 years ago. So that's, what year is it? That's 2017? Yeah. Festus Ezeli says, as my guy Mark Jackson always says, there are sermons in stones. Hashtag preacher preach. Mark Jackson replies, shh, they said we don't like each other. LOL. Hope you're good, big fella. Festus Ezeli. 3 crying laughing emojis. Let them tell it. There. Solved it.
There.
We did it. We got to the bottom of Festus Ezeli has not been mentioned this much on Sports Talk Radio, maybe ever.
Sacramento's Festus Ezeli.
Sacramento.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I trained with Albie Akani trained Festus Ezeli.
Yeah. Look, I mean, these are all part of like their flags that you're either going to put up that are going to be tagged on someone or not. Like when you're going through the deep background process, these things you want to get to the bottom of. And so I hope that the Kings have got to the bottom of every single one of these things.
I hope they called Festus Ezeli.
Yeah.
I hope they
talk to Harrison Barnes.
Go talk to Harrison.
Okay.
Well, Harrison already said they're not going to talk to him. That would be funny. Yeah, he already said, yeah.
He knew all along. They ain't gonna ask me about Mark Jackson. They ain't Harrison Barnes knew all along it was going to be Mark Jackson.
Yeah, look, I mean, look, you go back to these reports and you read them and you read who wrote them originally, and you can go through and kind of figure out like what's who the writers are and all that stuff. And like, look, I'm a guy who has anonymous sources. So, and I can also tell you that if there are this many stories, there are more. But, again, some of them you can't write, some of them you can. Because, I mean, I've seen so many crazy things in Sacramento, and I know so many other stories that have happened that I can't write.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Off the Record with James Ham, the King's Beat. That's why you need to be a premium subscriber over at the King's Beat.
There's a couple of stories I can't even say there that are like, oh dear Lord.
Those are the premium subscribers.
Yeah. So if it were like if Mark Jackson were a coach this whole time or an assistant coach the whole time and was getting along with everybody and was able to reset where he was as a coach, I would have no problems with him right now. But again, I don't see the continued education. That's what it comes down to. It's that, you can't just wander into the league and find instant success all the time. It happens every once in a while, but I mean, look at Steve Nash just like spinning his tires and not having a great time in Brooklyn. Chauncey Billups. Sometimes it works, and people say, "Oh, well, Steve Kerr did that." Well, no, Steve Kerr was also like in a front office, running the Phoenix Suns. Whether that was successful or not is another question.
It wasn't.
but still,
no, wait a minute.
He was around the game when he stepped into that spot.
Yeah. Wasn't he the GM when they went to the Western Conference Finals?
I don't know.
I think he was.
I don't think so.
I think he was.
I don't think so.
That's a good question, but I don't think so.
Well, let your boy, the investigator, go to work here. Oh, what do we got? Suns were eliminated by the Spurs in 5 in the first round of the playoffs.
I thought he was. I could have been wrong, but I thought he was.
I don't know. There's a Nazi Germany reference in here.
Oh, my.
Oh, boy. Either way, I'll tell you, like, even as a writer, even as someone who's been around him and everything, like I can have an opinion about Mark Jackson and his candidacy and what that would mean to the Sacramento Kings. And not everyone has to agree with me, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I can look at and see how things have worked out here in Sacramento with other situations, and really just tell you that, is it worth the gamble? There are safer and better options. And that's how I rank them. There are safer and better options. Better options, coaches that have better track records, that have been in the league longer. Again, like look at Mike Brown's career win percentage. Did it come with a star? Sure it did.
I don't know why we disqualify coaches who coach stars. Like what
No.
was he supposed to do? Like, nah, guys, I can't coach this guy. No one will ever take me seriously. What are we doing?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
No, I think so too. But you have to look at the guys like Steve Clifford who didn't have stars and also like kind of
I
go,
don't want to.
okay. I don't want to give him credit for anything.
Steve Clifford. Steve Clifford just does not excite me at all, man. Not at all.
Good basketball mind, good guy.
Absolutely. And I don't know
disagree.
why. I don't know why it matters. Like it's not like I'm not going to cover the Sacramento Kings to cover Steve Clifford. Like I'm watching the product on the court.
No, of course.
Which is of course a representation of Steve Clifford, but I don't know. That doesn't excite me for some reason. And I know Mike Brown isn't super exciting for some people, but I think and have thought a lot of Mike Brown, and I'd love even prior to this final group being withered down here a little bit. I liked him more than Charles Lee. Like I can't tell you anything about Charles Lee and be genuine in that conversation. I know what Jill tells me. I know what James tells me. That's about the extent of what I know. I know Darvin Ham a little bit more. Will Hardy is a name I'd heard for a couple of years and was just super intrigued by. Mike Brown was in my top 3 when this all started, and the other 2 are gone. I'm thrilled if it was Mike Brown. I don't know why I can't get excited for Steve Clifford. I don't know. It feels like boring. I don't know.
No, I get you, but I also understand that like if you're running a franchise that has struggled a bunch and you need a defensive-minded coach, like we can say that Will Hardy, Darvin Ham, and Charles Lee could be great defensive coaches, but we don't know that. And that's a problem. We don't know that. And again, that's where I would kind of like bring it back to Mark Jackson. We know that in one circumstance, he showed improvement as a coach. Take the fact that Michael Malone was there out of it, he was able to improve for 3 years. But it's not the same game. And so where are you going to get it? Because if he is your choice, you need incredible assistants that have been in the game. You need really good assistants either way. But if it's Mark Jackson, we're talking about guys who are like that are next head coaches type guys that can step in and do the X's and O's, because that has never been the strong suit here. It's getting guys to buy in. So,
James, and you don't have a rooting interest or anything like that. You want to cover a winning team. That's about as far as the rooting interest goes. But let me give you a hypothetical. If the Sacramento Kings went through all this and they genuinely believed that Mark Jackson was the best candidate, whether they're right or wrong, that's a completely different story. But they genuinely like, no, this is the best guy. But we just can't do it because, the backlash or, all this other stuff. Would you be okay with that? If they thought he was the best guy, but they essentially were afraid to hire him because of everything they got back, would you be okay? Would you understand it? How would you feel about that?
Yeah, would I understand it if the backlash was there? And because we see the backlash, right? If they took that into consideration, like I don't think that the fan base is freaking out over nothing. Like if you think he's the best candidate and you've gone through the vetting process and all that stuff, and that's who you hire, there is going to be backlash for sure. But like I'll be one who has to go in there and interview Mark Jackson every day. And like he's a basketball coach at that point. Like I have a very strict way that I handle coaches when I'm covering a team. If he's a head coach, he's a head coach. Like this discussion ends. Like again, you talk about Like, I don't have a horse in this race at all. I don't. My only thing, I would like to cover a winner for once. Like, I mean, 12 years of horrible basketball. And that's where I keep saying, this is about the X's and O's, the basketball side of it. Like, who gives you the best chance to win? And that's why, that's sort of how I ranked my guys, like in this thing. And they're in the top three, but that wouldn't have been my top three at all. I would have had a completely different top three than what they have. Well, Mike Brown would have made the top three. I told you guys last week, like, Mike Brown is the safest and the easiest, and probably will be the most successful out of all seven. The younger and experienced guys are a gamble. Each of them have their own gamble. Steve Clifford, you kind of know what you're getting. You kind of know what you're getting, and I wrote it this weekend. You know what you're getting, and it's more of the same. Like, you've hired a bunch of coaches that have struggled to take a team to the next level. And I've seen enough of, like, the player arc, the coaching arc of Steve Clifford to, you can see where it's good and then it starts to tail off. He's been, like, in tough situations where they blew up his team in Orlando, but they blew up his team in Orlando because they never won. Like, you don't blow up a team to just blow it up unless you're the Florida Marlins, Oakland A's. You blow up a team because it's not successful. And that's why they traded Gordon and Vucevic and Evan Fournier and all that stuff. So look, I don't know, like, the inclusion of Mark Jackson on this list, I thought was interesting to start. I didn't think he'd make it to round two. He's made it to round two. If he's the last man standing, he's the last man standing. And, if he wants to have a conversation with what I've said on D'Lo and Casey, that's fine. I don't have any problems doing that. And we start on day one with a fresh start, and we move forward.
I think that's day two. I think that introductory press conference, some questions need to be
Of course they do.
asked and answered. Just because I'll be thinking about it if you don't say it. Was it Will, Darvin, and Mike as your top three? Will Hardy, Darvin Ham, Mike Brown?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was obsessing over that the whole time you were talking. I was just wondering if it was if that was the top three. You kind of alluded to this a minute ago. Who can build the best staff?
That's a good question. All three of them.
Because you just emphasize how important it is.
I think it's Mike.
I thought.
I think it's probably Mike as well. But all of these guys, have ties with around the league. Mark Jackson has ties around the league for sure. So maybe he can. And they all three of them have different agents. And so you'll look at that too. Like, the agents help you build a staff. Like, they'll help you if you get to the point where you can't get your number one guy, but you'll get your number two guy, and then they'll help you build out your 3, 4, 5, 6, the rest of the staff. And I think that's a good thing. Like, there's a lot of good coaches that are going to be available to add to these staffs. And that's a big part of it. You got to get it right. But I think the key that we're seeing is that the Kings, their main focus is, let's start with a defensive-minded coach, and we can build from there.
Yeah. Defense.
Mm-hmm.
So who's the offensive-minded assistant coach that's going to come in and help, like, all three of these guys?
Me.
Okay.
I don't know. And that's, again,
who's
go back to
second?
Mike Brown. Mike Brown just spent 6 years with Steve Kerr and his staff, and the great coaches that have come through that staff. So he has
Luke
put
Walton.
in the time. Yeah.
He's getting paid for another year. Why not bring him back? You
Wait,
got Luke.
is he a
You got
consultant?
Alvin.
No,
You got to work, Luke.
just kidding.
Nothing in this world is free.
We've only got like a minute left. Anything we need to know about Joe Dumars? Anything kind of underlying there that?
No, for 3 years he was in Sacramento. They never once let us interview him, ever.
Joe Dumars, we hardly knew you.
Exactly, we hardly knew you. And if Amic's report, which I believe is accurate, that he wanted a little bit more power and didn't get it, that's fine. Like I'm okay with the way that Monty and Wes are handling this thing right now, and hopefully they get the coaching hire right, regardless of who it is. Hopefully it is the right decision, and hopefully it's their decision. And like not having an extra voice in the room, that's a good thing.
Yep.
Like
There it is.
there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen. Like the fewer the better.
I agree.
They're gonna burn something. They don't stop messing around. You got a chance to win 2 VIP tickets to the Golden Sky Fest, the 2-day music, beer, and food fest at Discovery Park, October 15th and 16th. Enter on the contest page at ESPN1320.net. Head over to the King's Beat, become a subscriber to the newsletter and the podcast as well. The King's Beat podcast